I'm Susanna Janssen. I'm the author of Wordstruck, The Fun and Fascination of Language. And here we are at the Mendocino Book Company in Ukiah, California for an evening of warmth for the heart, food for the brain, and tickles for the funny bone. So let's get started, and I'll tell you a little bit about my book first. In the first year that the book was out, it won a first place award in humor, which I'm very, very proud of. Right. And it won 2 other national awards too as, what do you call it, runner-up or something like that. Honorable mentions in education, which is why I'm so excited about the combination of humor and education at the high school. So there's metaphor to malapropisms, and there's Shakespeare, Cockney slang. I can only hit a couple of things here because there's 60 different things. How to detect a liar by the words that they use. Something called foreign accent syndrome, which is an actual medical syndrome where about 100 people in recorded history, which started about 100 years ago, have awakened from a head trauma with a whole new linguistic life. They're speaking their native language with a heavy foreign accent, or in some very rare cases, they're speaking a foreign language. Hard to believe, inexplicable. And also the language police, which there actually are language police worldwide in about 180 different countries. And then I've dedicated quite a few pages to what really, really went on behind closed doors in my college classrooms. A couple of things were illegal, and I won't read about those tonight because they would be self-incriminating. So I'll tell you a bit about why there's a second edition, and this will involve a couple of readings, so I'm going to get comfortable here. Second edition of the book because a lot happened in the world of words in the course of a year. A lot of things changed, and also I found some mistakes, things like that in my book that I wanted to deal with. And I also had written some new material I wanted to include. But the changes in terms of updates and things like that were pretty important to me. The biggest one in my mind, the biggest one in the mind of the world had to do with Shakespeare and what I wrote about Shakespeare. Because I made quite a case for the, against the anti-Stratfordian theories that Shakespeare couldn't possibly have been the single author of all of those works. So I had to go back and do some rewriting. Most scholars had credited William Shakespeare of Stratford-on-Avon as being the single mind and hand of the entire body of work. 37 plays, comedy, history, and tragedy, and many works of poetry, including 154 sonnets. Until now, that is. In October 2016, and by the way, it was almost date coincident with when I handed in my finalized manuscript to the formatter, which was to go to the publisher. After years of research, the Oxford University Press took center stage in media and academia, announcing that with the new edition of the complete works of William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe would share credit as the co-author of 3 Henry VI plays. This is an earth-shaking development, and of course not all scholars agree with the researchers' conclusions. One thing for sure, controversy and theories will continue to abound, seasoned with scholarship, speculation, scandal, and the obsession to discover the truth about William Shakespeare that, despite wondrous technology in the 21st century, can never be completely known. The second thing that happened is that, I had taken a trip to Cuba and written extensively about Cuba, someplace in here, just a second. And my conclusion was very sunny, very optimistic about normalization of relations with Cuba. How do we write that? Fidel Castro died on November 25th, 2016 at age 90. And with his brother Raul as president, 2008 to 2018, the revolution lived on, though with mostly welcome, if tentative, liberal advances for the Cuban people. It seems a profound irony that in the very same month as the death of Fidel, the firebrand of revolutionary anti-American ideals for almost a half a century, Donald Trump was elected U.S. president and immediately began closing the doors to the normalization of Cuban-American relations that had been initiated by Barack Obama and Raul Castro. At the time of this writing, early 2018, the future of those relations are uncertain. With the administration of Donald Trump, all bets are off, and it appears that the thaw of a developing détente may again freeze into acrimonious relations and even harsher restrictions on travel and trade. May it not be so. That's about as political as I got in the book. You have to be a little, not careful, but I wanted to be a book for everybody. The third thing that I had to update was fruitcake. And fruitcake plays an important role in this book, as does Scrabble, because of my mother, fruitcake also. And something happened in the world of fruitcake that kind of shook my world. So I'll just read you a little bit about the background of fruitcake. My Italian mama, along with being a pro at Scrabble, is a legendary cook and produces loaves of old-fashioned fruitcake every year. The rich, moist kind that many people actually eat and enjoy. Last year, I got one for Christmas, another for the 4th of July, and a third for my birthday in November, because she always makes extras and freezes them. She knows I'm going to tell her the same joke every Christmas Eve when I land on her back porch, road weary but holly jolly, after 7 to 8 hours en route from Ukiah to Bakersfield. Somehow her curiosity always kicks in before her memory of last year's telling of the joke does. Mom, did you know that a newly discovered Dead Sea Scroll has revealed the existence of a fourth wise man? Really? We didn't hear about that in church. It's because he was turned away for bringing a fruitcake. But here's what I had to put in the book. I needed an update. In August of 2017, National Geographic reported that a 107-year-old piece of fruitcake was found in an abandoned building in Antarctica. Believed to have been brought there by the British explorer Robert Scott in 1920. Wow. The team who discovered this culinary relic reported that it, quote, looked and smelled almost edible. Keep this in mind when you assemble your emergency survival kit. So that's a little bit of the background about my second edition. But I'd like to get a little bit more into the book with you. Malapropisms. Do you know where that word came from? Yes. Malaprop. It was
Greek.
French.
Greek?
No. It's an invented word.
It's a woman, British.
Yeah.
And she would, that was her name, and then whoever wrote it, they used her name, and she would make these things that were wrong.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ware. That she was a character in a book, in a play actually called The Rivals, and she was named in the book Mrs. Malaprop, and which kind of fits, mal, bad, and a prop as in apropos, badly apropos. So it's using an existing word in the wrong context. And I couldn't help but write about these things. I didn't name any names exactly in here, but...
Why not?
Well, some of them were my former college administrators. But the ones that I'm going to... Because this is the interactive part where you get to, holler it out if you... So a friend of mine, it's actually, I'll just tell you, I haven't had a glass of wine yet, but I'm starting to reveal things I probably shouldn't. He was my ex for many years. Well, now he's my ex for many years, but he's he was in law enforcement, and he had to read these reports that officers had written. And here we go. We petitioned off the area as soon as we arrived. Should have been.
Partition.
Her husband had died, so the claim was a mute point. In lieu of the late hour, we had to postpone the investigation.
What?
View. I mean, like, lieu is a fancy word to say view? I won't go on. Before the stakeout, we Simonized our watches. Now, you have to be kind of this age. Do you know what that was? To Simonize what? Wax. Wax. Polish or wax? Floor, I forget. But it was a product called Simoniz, I-Z at the end. And so they made this verb out of it, to simonize. We're simonizing our watches. He went off on a tyrant as soon as I started. What?
Tirade.
A tirade. To calm the crowd, we had to step in and nip it in the butt. And this was written, it wasn't just spoken, it was written. Okay, one more. The suspect appeared to be blind and was accompanied by a sightseeing dog. Now, this is a little closer to home, and I'm not going to name any names. An acquaintance in the retail business lamented that there is such a stigmata about buying used clothes. A family member maintained that it was just a platonic relationship. And who needs a comedy writer when you can listen to politicians' pronouncements? To wit, the former U.S. Senator from Nevada, Chick Hatch, is immortalized for opposing the waste repository at Yucca Mountain by refusing to have his state become a nuclear suppository. It's on the record. In a paper attempting to describe the interconnectedness of all things, a high school student wrote, where's my props? The universe is a giant leaving out a key syllable. And his teacher couldn't resist writing at the end of the essay, your answer gives new meaning to the Big Bang Theory.
You're getting too scorpionic. Or not enough.
I loved writing about, these words that you see them all over now, that they don't have a translation into English. We may have the experience, the concept, but we don't have a word for it. And one of the most common ones is the German word Schadenfreude. Say it?
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude. That sounds better than what I had. Schadenfreude, which is taking joy in
Someone else's misery.
someone else's misery or misfortune. Exactly. So I picked some that I'm sure you haven't heard of yet. This is also from German, and a lot of us can relate to this. Torchless Panic. Torchless Panic. Torchless Panic. Gate closing panic. Is the fear of diminishing opportunities with advancing age. German is a language where you can tack several nouns together to create a new concept in a single word, thus opening new gates to endless possibilities, even while torchless Panic reminds us that old ones are clanging shut. Japanese, yoko meshi. Yoko means horizontal, and meshi is boiled rice. You're going to love this one. It's the Japanese term for the stress of communicating in a foreign language. And it could be roughly tacked together in English as a meal eaten sideways. Right? Because yoko is horizontal, and meshi is boiled rice. This term holds clever wordplay in the fact that Japanese is written vertically. And most other languages are written horizontally. Even so, don't you think all languages, especially English, should have a word for that particular discomfort? And the last one I'll read is another German word, Korinthenkacker. Korinthenkacker. This rollicking word translates literally as raisin pooper. And refers to someone who is too absorbed in nitpicky details and busy with petty trivia to be of any use. It makes me think of a restaurant manager, I have a long history in restaurant business, by the way, who in the chaos of the lunch rush could be found in his office perfecting the peeling of an apple in a single unbroken strip. Or better said, he sat at his desk pooping raisins. There's some neat ones in there, and I wrote another chapter on untranslatable words from Spanish. There's a lot of Spanish sprinkled through here, but it's sprinkled in for the non-Spanish speaker. Unlike my next book, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. But I couldn't possibly write a book about words and language without having a lot of Spanish in there. And actually, I think I'm gonna get into some Spanish now with you. I wrote a chapter called Between the Sword and the Wall. Because we have in English the expression between a rock and a hard place. But the Spanish expression is so much more medieval and illustrative of emotion and anxiety. It says between the sword and the wall.
Ooh.
And you just picture yourself, pressed up against the wall with this medieval sword at your throat. And your eyes are shifting around, casting about, wondering how you're going to get out of this. So things really get fun and colorful when the expression, I'm comparing Spanish and English expressions, communicates the same basic idea, but with a totally different imagery. We all know the boring old adage, silence is golden. But Spanish instructs us that in boca cerrada no entra mosca. Flies don't enter a closed mouth. We attempt to, let's see. One of my mom's favorite retorts to my missteps has always been, it serves you right. The mama of another land might say, quien con perro se acuesta, con pulgas se levanta. He who lies down with dogs gets up with fleas. That certainly offers more color, if not more consolation. Another of Mom's favorites was, go fly a kite. In Spanish, vete a freír espárragos. Go fry asparagus.
Asparagus.
To each his own, with a roll of the eyes, is the beloved Spanish expression, cada loco con su tema. Every nutcase with his theme. And that reminds me of one of my favorite expressions that has not a match in English at all. De médico, poeta y loco, todos tenemos un poco. Of doctor, poet, and nutcase, we all have a little bit. That simple philosophy about the human condition probably holds true for all.
I like that.
This is from a new piece that I wrote and included in this book. I was in Italy with a group of students of all ages from Mendocino College, and we were studying Italian at the Dante Alighieri Institute in Siena. Now, unlike my experience at the Spanish school in Oaxaca, Mexico, where there were so many Americans, we were some of the only Americans. We were practically the only Americans there. And I was in a class, I was the only American in my class. This led to an unusual situation. I had become fast friends with Rita from Germany, and the other students in my class included 2 Frenchmen, a Brazilian girl, 2 Japanese girls who looked like fashion models, a woman from Switzerland, another from Denmark, a businessman from Canada, a teenager from Mexico, and a foreign ambassador to the Vatican. Our teacher, Alessandra, was the school director, statuesque, fashionable, no nonsense, and rather fearsome. I could hold my own in conversation, and she was forgiving of my errori, my mistakes with vocabulary and tenses, but When I had to listen to something in Italian, I couldn't even get a word of it. I hope things are different. I'm going to find out in May when I go back. So she gave us this assignment to write stereotypes. This is a typical, I do this in Spanish all the time. Write stereotypes that you hold of other cultures. And she named the cultures for us. Francese, Arabo. Did you get that one? Arabo. Mm-hmm. Tedesco, German. Svizzero, Swiss. Svedese, they sound alike. Swedish. Chino. Giapponese. Italiano. Americano. So we all separately, we wrote our little list of 3 adjectives. This was adjective practice, right? Okay, and then the other students were now called upon to reveal stereotypes about Americans at the very end. The way it worked out is that, we all were kind of in agreement, and each nationality, it was a mix of positive and negative things, The Swiss were very punctual and that kind of thing, and Germans were very rigid, organized, etc. Now called upon to reveal stereotypes about Americans. There were at least a dozen different adjectives and unanimous agreement among my classmates. For a moment I felt panic and the urge to run from the room while listening to a litany of negative stereotypes coming from all sides. Hence the title of this piece is Stereotypes in Stereo. I really had to take hold and remind myself that this was not about or against me. Here's the list. Senza gusto, bad taste. Maleducato, rude. Forte a bocca, loudmouth. Ignorante. Disinformato, uninformed. Egotista, arrogante. Dispendioso, wasteful. And inelegante. They were apologetic to me. Such a harsh barrage. And to lighten up a difficult moment, I made a joke and said it was inelegante that hurt the most. And I might add, this was during the second reign of George W. Bush. And at this time, I was going to Europe almost every year, and there was a big difference between the first era of his presidency and the second, in terms of people's opinion, Europeans' opinion. They were kind of just slapping their foreheads at that point. On Friday of the second week at Italian school in Siena, I was saying warm goodbyes to Alessandra and all the students in my class. The 2 gentlemen from France were effusive with their hugs and good wishes for my future success. In parting, one of them spoke for both. Finally, we have met an American we like. How was I to respond to that backhanded compliment? I just smiled, accepted one last hug, and walked away knowing that whether by a millimeter or a mile, the landscape of our cultural stereotypes had experienced a shift. Yeah. Ooh, the language police. Do you know anything about language police throughout the world? I didn't either, but I knew about the RAE, the Real Academia de Español, the Royal Academy of Spanish. It's a very powerful organization based in Spain, but with branches in all of the Spanish-speaking countries and regions, of which there's 21 countries, 21 Spanish-speaking countries, which is an amazing thing that I wrote about. I'll just talk about for a second. You know how in Germany, you go to Germany and people can't understand each other from one end, but one district to another? It's the same thing in Holland, problems in Italy. 21 Spanish-speaking countries can intercommunicate. I mean, there's dialectical differences, but there's nothing like, we don't understand the thing you're saying. It's not like that. They share the same verbs, they conjugate their verbs the same, different expressions, some different slang and stuff like that. So the language police, I call the RA the language police, they're really pretty serious about keeping Spanish pure and minimizing particularly the incursion of English. In Italy, now they just suggest, please, please, stop using those English words, and nobody listens. It's Italy, you know. France is pretty heavy-handed.
Yeah.
But here we go. According to Wikipedia's list of language regulators, there are 130 organizations like the three, well, I'll get to that in a minute, which exert control over 110 languages in 187 countries and regions. Do they rule with an iron fist, a jerk of the chain, a wave of the hand, a shrug of the shoulders? I refuse to accept the vast research assignment this would entail to answer these questions unless it comes with a limitless travel budget. At least for now, we shall look into some of the recent regulatory activities. In French, rather more determined and heavy-handed than Italians or Americans, the French have done more than recommend. They have actually outlawed the use of terms like email and hashtag in official documents and decreed that these must be expressed as, forgive my French, where's my French-speaking friends? Courriel and mot dise, respectively. The Académie, how do I say that? The Académie. Académie Française. Française. The Académie Française. 2 years of French study down the drain. Is a powerful council of the French government that rules on all matters linguistic and rails against the sullying of the language with English words. This has been going on for a long time. The Académie Française and the French Ministry of Culture continue to resist the invasion of Le Weekend, a blog, Twitter, ebook, parking, how would they say that? Parking, chewing gum, and dozens more. Rejection of many terms, including fast food and binge drinking, is every bit as socio-cultural as it is linguistic. In the United States, there is no regulation of English in the UK or in the US, none whatsoever. But in the US, there are 3 bodies of language police. They're not regulating English. Any ideas?
Lawyers?
They're regulating language.
Censors.
Well, Spanish, there is a branch of the RAE that regulates Spanish in the U.S. I don't think you could guess the other 2. One is a native language. Close. But no cigarro. Cherokee, by the Council of the Cherokee Nation. And the third one, I don't think you could guess it, it's Yiddish. Yiddish by the YIVO, Institute for Jewish Research. And there is a language police of English in one English-speaking country. It's South Africa. I have relatives in South Africa. So this is an interesting topic to me. I'm going to read a little bit more here. In Spain, the RAE, the Royal Academy of Letters of Spanish, has declared war on the gratuitous use of English words in advertising that the purchasing public perceives as sounding more powerful, more beautiful, sexy, valuable, affluent, etc., than their native Spanish. The anti-English in advertising ad campaign created to appeal to women, there's one for men, I won't read that far, shows a come-hither beauty with flowing blonde hair moving provocatively as she holds a pink rosebud against her cheek. And in the background, a sultry female voice in Spanish promises, new fragrance, new woman, sensually repeating the name of the perfume, swine. In a follow-up commercial, the same model gyrates in slow motion, and the disembodied voice returns with that sexy Spanish whisper to reveal to audiences, swine, the perfume whose name in English tells you that you smell like a pig. Since it was in English, you smell like swine, a fragrance of pigs that penetrates your dreams. It sounds very good, but it smells very bad. In the final scene, she's in the arms of Mr. Tall, Dark, Handsome, and they gaze at one another with knitted brow as they realize as the realization of their surrounding stink begins to dawn. Huge campaign on Spanish television, and they had one for men too. Had nothing to do with perfume. Really interesting stuff. I've been reading a lot about how learning a foreign language so positively affects the brain biology. And there is evidence now in research that it can slow the onset of Alzheimer's, if Alzheimer's is in fact to onset, and slow the progress. It can delay the onset by up to 5 years and slow the progress of the disease. So I'd like to read you a little bit about this brain research that I did and wrote about, because it's pretty amazing stuff. There's a whole section on the wonders of the bilingual brain. But first we have to lay the groundwork. The lifelong prognosis for humans, although it still ends in death, is not nearly as bad as most of us grew up thinking it was. Until very recently, science firmly held that brain cells cannot regenerate. Do you remember that? Remember the sinking feeling that came with that so-called knowledge? What researchers have now discovered is that new neurons are continually being added to the cerebral cortex, the brain center responsible for learning and higher decision-making. What a welcome revelation. The brain actually can grow new cells and repair itself, and there really is hope for future effective treatment of brain disorders and injuries. For now, though, while a good orthopedic surgeon and about $3 worth of titanium can get you a new knee or a new hip, a partial or full brain transplant is not an option. And we are best served to dedicate ourselves to coddling and not curdling the one that we have. Engage your long-term memory once again and recall your high school class, biology class, in which you learned that the average adult brain is home to some 100 billion neurons. Some of you might also remember making a mental review of the presumed fact that each shot of alcohol kills about 1 million brain cells. And then doing the math at the end of a particularly wild weekend. Here's more good news. In 1993, scientists making cell counts of alcoholic versus non-alcoholic brains came to the conclusion that this idea of alcohol-induced cell death just isn't so. I'll say here. Yes, a large amount of alcohol does impair the brain, but not by killing cells. Rather, it damages the dendrites, those branched extensions, that look like the little ends of trees, thus inhibiting neurons' ability to communicate with each other, causing loss of coordination, garbled speech, scrambled thoughts, and possibly Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. Even though dendrites can self-repair, it's still not advisable to pour a martini, light up a smoke, and camp on the couch, confident that genius scientists and profit-motivated drug companies will soon produce the magic pill or potion to disappear the plaque that causes the Swiss cheese effect of Alzheimer's. The best brain elixir, this is called. Did someone say brain elixir? Let's make it something we can drink, especially if it tastes like pina colada, or eat, preferably with the flavor and texture of fine dark chocolate. Lacking that, at least give it to us in a pill form, because after all, this is 21st century America, and we expect things to be fast, effortless, and effective. What? There's no such pill? Okay, then how about a surgical procedure? Risk-free, quick recovery, and with this saggy jowl in the meantime. The subject of growing a bigger brain captured my attention when I read a BBC report about a scientific study of the brain size of London cab drivers. Interns undergo 3 to 4 years of intensive training and then take a test to determine the accuracy of their mental map of the city's 25,000 streets and thousands of landmarks, and their ability to quickly calculate routes and avoid traffic jams. Only about half of them pass to become taxi drivers in one of the world's busiest cities and craziest street grids. In each of the individuals in the study, MRI imaging, I guess I was repetitive there, huh? MRI imaging, showed that a specific part of the brain, the posterior hippocampus, had grown remarkably and continued to develop as the cab driver spent hours each day behind the wheel, mentally mapping the quickest route between 2 points. Another recent landmark study in Sweden used recruits in the Swedish Armed Forces Interpreter Academy who were tested before and after a 3-month period of intensive foreign language study. Compared to the control group, the language students showed growth in the hippocampus as well as 3 areas of the cerebral cortex. Since the hippocampus is responsible for learning new material, for spatial navigation, and the cerebral cortex is related to language learning, the findings in both studies seem logical in retrospect. What is truly stunning is the realization that the brain actually behaves like a muscle, increasing in size and strength with mental exercise. So what do you need to do? Learn foreign language, music, dance. What else?
Right.
What? Drive a cab. And exercise. Exercise is, I wrote about exercise too, but for us it's almost a given. I mean, we're just taking that one for granted.
And
But
not
exercise
overdose
is a
on
given
alcohol.
too. Do what?
And not overdose on alcohol.
Of course not, because, it does have an effect. Okay, I should read you about Ukiah.
Yay!
I came here in 1988, and I came here specifically to take the job at Mendocino College from Sacramento. This was unknown territory. I'd never been this far north. And I was living in Sacramento, but I mean, you just didn't get on the 101 and start going north. But I had to come up here for a job interview. I picked all the wrong route. I picked the worst route possible. But I came for my interview, and I got the job. Quite amazingly, I got the job. One of the best things that ever happened to me. I'd heard of Ukiah. I even had a friend in Sacramento who had grown up here. But I hadn't a clue about its location. To a majority of Californians, the city's name Ukiah, Eureka, Wairika, Ukiah, and sometimes Yuba City thrown in, form a mystery map of vague, interchangeable geographic generalities. When I told friends from Sacramento after I got the job, all the way down to Southern California, the whole valley, Sacramento to Southern California, that I'd moved to Ukiah, the conversation usually proceeded in one of these 5 directions. Wow! You're all the way up on the Oregon border. Wairika, 285 miles north. Are you going to teach part-time at Humboldt State, too? Eureka, 160 miles north. Can you walk to the beach from your house? Mendocino, the town, 63 miles west. Isn't that close to Chico? Yuba City, 120 miles east. So you become a desert rat. Ukiah, 560 miles south. My brother came with me when I came up here to look for an apartment. It was dismal, looking for an apartment in this town. But there were things that were happening that were much more interesting and unsettling to me than the lack of apartments. Once we were within the city limits, the fun really began. We wanted to get off the freeway and into downtown Ukiah, so I voted to take the Perkins Street off-ramp. We passed up Gobi because, in part, we couldn't settle a debate as to the pronunciation of the word. He thought it should be a long O, as in Gobi. But I disagreed with a lengthy argument about how that would be the same pronunciation as the Gobi Desert. And Gobi with the double B surely rhymes with Nabi, like Globby, without the L. That seemed phonetically logical to me, though even the idea of a major street pronounced either way was disconcerting. We let it go to deal with later because soon we were at the stoplight of Perkins and State Street. I remember reading this at my first reading here in Ukiah. You've heard it before. Perkins and State Street, looking across the street from the freeway. I looked at the store windows across the intersection and over at my brother and then said in amazement, this must be a really progressive place. They have a Fredericks of Hollywood on the main street of downtown. I wish I had a photo of that moment, but in my mind's eye, I still see a sensuous display of mannequins, clad in flimsy red lingerie. Must have been around 4th of July. Seducing passerby from the picture window of what I later learned was the Palace Dress Shop. When my brother made a left turn off of Talmadge Road onto South State Street, and the big gaudy sign for the Rendezvous. Do you guys remember the Rendezvous? The Rendezvous.
Oh my gosh. No.
Yeah?
Yes.
Oh, yeah?
Horrors.
That's what it said, horror. That's what I said, que horror. Yeah, the rendezvous. At first it struck me as entertaining, but then sunk me into deep doubt about the linguistic ambiance in the town where I would henceforth teach. Oh, yes. Well, I got to tell you a little bit about Bakersfield, where I grew up, because my mother has since passed away, but I didn't change the book to refer to her in the past tense. I just couldn't bring myself to do that. But I have spent every single Christmas in Bakersfield with my family, every single Christmas of my life. I was driving the 99, I always took the 99, Sacramento, and then 99 all the way down, and I started just looking. It was raining, and I was really focusing on billboards. I was looking at billboards, and I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe what these billboards are telling me to do. And it all started with past the slick urbanity of Sacramento, coming up on Merced. I almost choked on my triple threat power bar at the sight of Lou Rodman's bar stools and dining billboard, inviting me to come in and check out our stool samples. I got a whole chapter out of what I saw on the highway. There are all these billboards, if you die tonight, heaven or hell, dial for truth. I found welcome distraction and immeasurable cheer and relief in a long lineup of bare-chested Chippendales, inviting me to experience 50 Shades of Men. Suddenly the valley didn't seem so sleepy anymore. Years ago, on the drive south, my passenger from San Francisco commented on the cutesy names of towns and roads in the Central Valley. I was so used to growing up near Buttonwillow, Terabella, and Pumpkin Center that I was embarrassed to say I'd never even noticed. I felt like a hick around my big city friend from the city. Now I revel in the folksy charm of towns named Gustine, Snelling, and Chowchilla. I nod at the faded sign that still heralds Selma as the raisin capital of the world, and drive on past off-ramps for Dinuba, Goshen, Tipton, Pixley, Conejo, which means rabbit, Early Mart, and Alpaw. The Elmo Highway to McFarland is a sign that Bakersfield is near. The Lerdo Highway to Shafter means I'm getting warmer. Then there's Kimberlina Road, and finally the sign that tells me I've arrived, at least to the northernmost end of Bakersfield, Oildale. There's still Merle Haggard Drive and Buck Owens Boulevard to navigate before I reach the family home. There's a growing pile of scribbled notes atop the filing cabinet waiting to find their way to a fresh yellow pad and from there eventually into print. The umbrella theme of words and language still holds, but like most of the subjects in Wordstruck, the topics are all over the board and the world. Another fat file will soon become a handbook for intermediate and advanced Spanish students. And I've finally heeded the call of a notebook of travel stories from 4 months of mostly stranger-than-fiction adventures in South America that will be published in early 2019. I don't think so. No, I don't think I'll produce a novel in this lifetime, any more than I think I'll write a symphony, pilot a jet, or sing my opera at the Met. That said, the possibilities are unlimited, and I will still never say never. So, an upcoming book. There's a lot to do on it still. It's a bigger project than I thought it was, but I've been making notes on it for years, and it's a book for Spanish students at the intermediate and advanced, like, mid-advanced levels. And just briefly, it's not a textbook, it's a handbook. When you learn a foreign language, you're laying it over the top of your native language, right? And because you do that, your native language bleeds through in very, very predictable ways, and very repetitive ways, repeated ways as well. And these become what are called fossilized errors. Fossilized because they become like bone. They get repeated so much. They're very hard. They're often in a blind spot too. So what I propose to do in this book is identify them and give the practices that go with it, and try to keep it kind of light and fun, and just work through a lot of these things that I've been listening to these mistakes for 45 years. I think I stopped making them myself. Most of them I think I stopped making around 40 years ago. But Bob, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? So, and the other project is the travel book. And some of you have read some of those stories that I wrote about the travels in, different places. But mainly, I never intended it to become a book. But I started writing those travel stories from South America, and it was quite a while ago that I was there. It was 40 years ago. And I questioned, is it valid to write a book about things that happened 40 years ago?
Why not? Why not?
Well, I decided it is, because travel 40 years ago was like, I don't know, continental adrift. I mean, nobody knew where we were, ever. And there was no communication. I did make a phone call one time to my boyfriend. I had to check up on him. And it took 4 hours to put the call through. I was in Buenos Aires. It took hours to put the call. I went back to my hotel. Finally they called. I came back to the telephone office. And back then, 40 years ago, a 5-minute call cost me $25, which was like my budget for the week. So I think it's an interesting thing to reminisce about for people who remember that era, and also interesting maybe for younger people who can't even conceive of not having that device and being connected at all times. I had my South American handbook, which I almost lost a couple of times in border crossings. They would disagree about where the borders really were, and they wanted to take away your maps and things like that. I have a question to ask you. Let's go back a minute to my Spanish book. The title of my Spanish book is Adios Gringo Lingo. Does anybody find that title offensive? Or you can always email me. Well, Facebook does.
Oh,
And Facebook won't let me have that. But it's one of my domains, so,
I was gonna say,
Google didn't mind, or whatever. Let's see my
Wow.
website.
I'll check with the Gringo, perhaps.
Huh? They did. I
Probably
took out
objected to
the
the
other
word
words, and it
gringo.
was gringo.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I think it hits the nail on the head. That's what it's
Yeah,
all
it
about.
does.
Anyway, I'd like to have time for you to ask some questions.
Do you have anything romance in your book, please?
Do I have any what?
Any romance?
Romance in my book? In this one? No. This is not a romance. But in that South American one, yes. Yes. It wasn't my boyfriend either, but no romance in there.
More of the loco guys.
How do you do your research?
And it wasn't Coco the Loco. Cheryl,
have something I'd like to offer, and that is enormous gratitude for all the lives that you have touched over so many years and the inspiration that you have brought to so many people.
This wasn't one of the illegal things that happened, but she was doing her final exam, her final oral presentation, and it was about wild mushrooms. And she brings this, she's doing this demonstration, talking to these guys about wild mushrooms, and then at the end of her presentation, she presents me with the mushrooms, and the students are like, oh God, she's trying to kill her off. But I took those mushrooms home, I sliced them up, and it was an unforgettable meal.
Do you have any ideas for Ukiah in terms of people having more social activities? One of the things I noticed about Ukiah is that we're often living our own lives, and like tonight is a great example of us getting together and we're all learning new things to hear about your book. I just think, wouldn't it be great if we had more areas or more opportunities for that?
Concerts, plays, fundraisers, those kinds of things. I think that's how
The library has a lot of.
the library activities.
I was wondering if you had any fun examples from your upcoming book.
One is called My Escape from Casablanca. And I was in Bolivia, and my traveling companion had fallen in love with Fernando, and they were off someplace. And I got stuck with his friend, Coco El Loco. And we were in a disco, and we were like in a corner table, and he was, I'll read you just a couple of lines. First he professed his undying love. It was our second meeting. Then he offered me everything he owned. I forget how many houses, acres of ranch land, head of cattle, silver mines, planes, and millions in cash. He swore if I left for Peru tomorrow as planned, he would find me in California and bring me back to Bolivia to marry him. Now he was turning angry. As he grabbed and clung to my arm, the most miraculous thing happened. He passed out on my shoulder. Tucked in between two walls of a tight corner, I couldn't get out. And I was pinned down by this guy, and so I kind of lifted him up and I pushed him against the wall, hoping, I shook him, I hoped he wouldn't wake up. He didn't. And then I wrote a note on the napkin and I put it in his pocket. It's kind of like breaking up with someone by text. But I couldn't get out of the disco because there were all these couples on tables and I couldn't get out to the exit. And so the dance floor was out there, so I had to climb over a 4-foot fence kind of thing. And then I had to drop down 3 feet onto the dance floor. Meanwhile, people are saying, "Loca Norteamericana." I was like mortified, but I got out finally into free air. And I didn't know where the heck I was. I didn't know how to get back to my hotel. Anyway, that's one story. Another story, did anyone read the story about me falling into a soup pot?
Oh!
Well, I had to, that's in the book. The whole messy, gooey story.
Are most of those stories the ones that you had in the newspaper?
Yes. And in the case of these stories, I have to admit, I shamelessly used the Ukiah Daily Journal to write the second book. Although I didn't know when I started writing travel articles that that's what I was doing. I started writing, just here and there, a little bit of Ecuador, a little bit of Italy, this and that. And then all of a sudden I wrote a couple of pieces from that 40-year-ago travel. And I hooked myself. I couldn't stop. I didn't start at the beginning, I started at the end. And then I had to circle all the way back around. And I didn't write the very first weeks of travel until the very end.
Wow.
So they were pretty much all in there.
But fun reading.
I enjoy
Fun
reading them
reading.
very much.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed
Now I
it.
have to knit them together. That's what they're lacking. Well, it would be easier. We just love these suits. And that was the days before suitcases had wheels. And here we were lugging these things around. We were buying all this stuff along the way.
We were so much younger and we didn't know what we didn't know.
We didn't know what was coming. Wheels on suitcases.
Have you tried stand-up comedy? Stand-up comedy? You like comedy?
Okay, on that note, I'll make an announcement that Nobody knows.
We won't sell.
You can tell. So this is not announced officially, it comes out on Monday, and my book just won another prize. Another national prize from, the first one was from the Next Generation Indie Book Awards, this one is from New York City Big Book Awards, it's called, and it's also in humor, it's the first place award in humor. I had a wonderful upbringing, but it was kind of serious. You know, wonderful mom and dad, very stable household, but serious upbringing, you know, Catholic and everything like that. And we weren't encouraged to cut up or be goofy, or we weren't punished for it either, well, except when I made those jokes about the Pope. That was a little tough on me. But I enjoyed humor in the classroom a lot, but I feel like it's kind of a whole new world for me, you know? I'm really pleased with it. And it comes out more in my writing, you know, than it does in my day-to-day conversations. But it's been awfully fun to be here with you and get to cut up a little bit.
So, did you journal as a young woman in your trip to South America?
I did.
You did? So
I
you
did.
had some reference for your stories?
Yes, I did. But I also told these stories to students in the years in my classrooms. And, you know, the main stories are just so foremost in my mind. But it was fun to be able to look back at my journal and fill in some gaps. I also wrote really extensive letters to my parents, and they saved them for me in an album. And the letters I wrote to my boyfriend were even more extensive, and he threw them all away. He turns out to be kind of an important figure in this memoir of a travel book, even though he never actually appears. Well, he does at the end. Yeah, and beyond.
How about a book about food?
A book about food?
Food, Mexican food,
Oh,
Italian food.
I want to write about Italian food because the words that, like some of the names of pastas and things like that, really fascinate me. Do you know that there's a pasta called a priest strangler? Yeah, strata prete, something like that. And you know that pasta called puttanesca? That's named after whores, or prostitutes, I should say. I'm sorry I used that word. Ladies in the night.
doves. Soiled doves.
Soiled doves. Yeah, because it was what they prepared for their guests. You know, it was a simple thing to do, and puttanesca. And then carbonara is another one. That was the railroad workers. But let's all get the pronunciation of, you know, where you put something on the top of a round of bread that you've toasted, and you put something on the top of it. We have to pronounce it right. Bruschetta.
How do you do your research?
I just, books, online, Wikipedia. I send money to Wikipedia every year because they're wonderful. And you have to cross-reference some things. You know, you have to kind of check your stuff a little bit. But when you think about everything at our fingertips, every piece of information we might want, we can find it. I can't imagine having to do that kind of research at the library with the Dewey Decimal System. It's unfathomable to me. Actually, a quick background story. There is, in my Shakespeare chapter, in the very end of the second part of that, there is the part about Shakespeare and the hokey pokey. Because the Washington Post does this invitational where they ask their readers to, it always has to do with words and language. And for example, one of their favorite things is change one letter of the word and give it a new definition. So reincarnation, coming back to life as a hillbilly. You can read them in the book. That's the only one I can think of, right? Oh, I can't think of the other ones right now. So this particular one was write the directions on how to do something in the style of a famous author. And Jeff Brecklin wrote how to do the hokey pokey in the style of Shakespeare. And I read it, you know, online or something like that. Or, no, I read it actually somewhere. I think I read it in the Post. And I really wanted to put it in my book. And I could have put it in my book because it was on the internet, but I just felt like I couldn't do that. I hired an investigator, a private investigator, to find this guy. Because he was 4 states away from, I don't know, wherever he was before, Maryland or something like that. And he gave me permission to put it in the book. Well, in that pause, I think we'll end. And I'll say thank you so very much.